Hello. So I've heard from a bunch of you that you're unavailable or out of town. So today I will keep it short and sweet. Maybe some of you will trickle in as I start talking. But I want to talk to you about the chart ruler and something called the chart signature. You do have a lecture on the chart ruler in the astrology basics section, and I specify that at Hidden Truths, we teach it a little different than you might find in other books or in other online programs. So I want to cover both so that you have the information. And then I'll explain why we use the way that we use the chart ruler. And I'll give you some chart examples. The other thing I want to talk to you about something called the chart signature. You do not have a lecture on this in particular. We did a couple of weeks ago talk about the chart signature. We didn't use that language, but we talked about adding up the polarity of the crosses and the elements, the modalities from the crosses and the elements, and coming up with a personality signature or personality trait. So a lot of fire and water might make someone very fiery. A lot of earth and water may make someone very muddy and slow. So today I want to just elaborate on that so that you could start learning the crosses and the elements side by side. And then we'll do an example of a chart signature so you can see some of the emphasis in the chart that is of importance because of the chart signature. So it's just another way of understanding why the person lives their life through the lens of that planet or that archetype the way that they do. It has some credence and some strength in the chart. And then I want to talk a little bit about if the person has a lot of emphasis on a particular cross, if they have a lot of fixed planets, or if they have a lot of cardinal or mutable. And I'll give you some examples as well. So one of the things I want you to start understanding is that astrology is a tool, and in my opinion, the best tool for personal development. And so if someone can start to understand their chart from all the different lenses, they start to accept exactly who they are. And I remember being in an astrology class and two of the girls looking at my chart and saying, oh, and they threw out some pieces of information. It was maybe my first week of astrology. And the first aha that I had around astrology is I am exactly who I'm supposed to be. And that's the beauty of astrology. No matter which angle you look at it, whether it's modalities or crosses or polarities in the elements, whether it's the myth of the sun, moon, ascendant, whether it's the emphasis of an opposition on an axis, you are exactly who you're supposed to be. And if spiritual development and personal development and self-love is about accepting these aspects of self, all of these tools and tricks in astrology basics is really about getting that client to accept themselves exactly as they are. We aren't broken, there's nothing to fix. There is, however, aspects to accept and integrate. So beginning with that viewpoint, as we look at charts, these are all sort of different ways to get there and what I want to focus on. So first, let's talk about the chart ruler. So if you have Googled or read other texts, as many students do, and I highly encourage, you're going to see the chart ruler linked to the ascendant. So I'm just going to show you my chart. And I'm going to send you that notes. What we'll do is we'll send out an email with the link and the attachment that I'm sharing with today. So this is my ascendant. It's in Sagittarius. So the ascendant has to do, and I'll just sort of reiterate, it has to do with the sign that teaches us to raise consciousness. There's always an incongruence between the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. The ascendant is that which we tend to tiptoe around. We tend to think that others have those qualities, but not ourselves. And as we go through the process, we start to realize that that sign is not only a sign that needs to be integrated, but we use it to raise consciousness around ourselves and integrate and feel whole and become whole. So it does definitely have a very high meaning in the chart. At Hidden Truths, we don't call it the chart ruler. I'll go into how we look at it, but it does have an importance. The reason that I don't call it the chart ruler, and I'll explain why others do, is because when we start looking at the cusps, we're going to start seeing that, especially in the transits in level 3, but even in level 2, when we start with aspects, you're going to start to see that every cusp rules that house, the sign on the cusp and the planet. And so to give only importance to that particular planet because it rules the ascendant, I think it takes away from a lot of the other areas. So let's say what most schools and books and programs will say. You find the ascendant. In my case, it's Sagittarius. The ruler of the ascendant, Sagittarius, is the planet Jupiter. So I go to Jupiter. It's in the 2nd house, and it's in the sign of Aquarius. And there's many levels of consciousness to interpret. So let's just go to the meaning of the 2nd house. The 2nd house has to do with values, has to do with possessions. So what I value and what I possess is found in the 2nd house. Since we're looking at it from a lens of Jupiter, there's going to be an abundance mindset, which I absolutely have, a gluttonous nature, which I absolutely have. However, it's through an Aquarius lens, which is allowance and tolerance of all different viewpoints, of all different philosophies, which is obviously what I do in the world. It could also be a gluttonous nature in terms of what I possess. I'm not by any means a hoarder or somebody that holds on to material things, but I have an emotional gluttony, an emotional or thought hoarding that I work through, and this moon in Cancer supports that. So it's one of the ways that I have to detach. And so this shows me how my ascendant, which could be my personality and could be my body, is reflected. The thing is, it's no less, in my opinion, important than the 2nd house cusp, which here is ruled by Capricorn. And then I would go find the ruler, which is Saturn. So I live perhaps my values, again, my material nature, what I value, what I possess, through a relationship or friends or couples, or that's all the meaning of the 7th house, in a very limited, structured way through a probably intellectual or logical, rational Gemini lens. Same with the 3rd. You take the cusp of the 3rd, my case is Aquarius. The way I think is linked to Aquarius nature, very open-minded. All groups are accepted because the 11th is about all the isms in the groups and tolerance of all different types. So I don't find it fair to just give the credence to the ascendant and that relationship with the ruler of the ascendant for that reason. So in these other traditions, Jupiter would be the ruling planet that would dictate the chart. And again, it's not to say that there isn't credence. It's absolutely important. The ascendant is absolutely important. The ascendant not only is what we need to integrate, so the more I can integrate my Zeus nature or my Jupiter Sagittarian nature, the more whole I'll feel, the more in terms of transmutation or raising consciousness, I will gain that consciousness. But I don't like to just isolate that one thing. So how do we teach the chart ruler? And you'll see this video is whatever the planet is that's right off of the ascendant. And in the video, I explain that someone can have that in the 3rd or the 4th house. It does not have to be right off of the ascendant. And the reason that I teach it this way is at conception, you're given your limiting thoughts, your limiting beliefs, what I call this plexiglass problem. The limit of happiness we're allowed. That's going to be viewed more in level 2 when we do aspects, hard aspects and soft aspects. Hard aspects are what I call my perfect older sister. They're the critical voices, the inner critic. Those are hard aspects, squares, oppositions, hard conjuncts, quincunxes. That voice goes round and round and round. We got that at conception. It's reflected in the chart. During pregnancy, we get our emotional nature, which is reflected in our moon by sign and house, and of course, aspects. At birth, we're given the body, we get the chart. And so that is where the imbalance begins. So weeks ago, I talked to you about everybody's manas prakriti, or perfect energetic or elemental balance, how much air, water, fire, and earth you have in your chart. So when you're brought home from the hospital or the birthing center, the imbalance begins. The temperature of the home, what you're fed, the nonsense in the conversation that's talked about you, what you're going to be, what you're going to do, what I call a prophecy. One of the reasons that I particularly use Greek mythology with the gods and the way that we teach it here is because in Greek mythology, all of the gods were given a prophecy. They were gone or taken to Apollo's temple at Delphi, and they were prophesied. If you know the myth of Narcissus, he was going to die if he saw his own reflection. So many of these myths, Oedipus, you're going to kill your father and marry your mother. These are prophecies. We at birth, and why the chart begins our spiritual journey after that first breath. Once we're taken home, the spiritual journey begins, the odyssey begins of finding our way back home to ourselves, has to do with the fact that we indeed are out of balance, and now we're trying to accept ourselves exactly as we are and find a way to make that whole. So at the moment that we are beginning our imbalance starts our journey. And that happens at birth, once we get our birth chart, and now we go home and we're honoring this prophecy. I like to look at the sun, moon, and ascendant to find the prophecy or the myth and how we're going to live it out. So I'm just going to share mine for a moment, and there's many iterations of this, but I was born into a cult, and one of the stories, one of the prophecies around my birth was that I crossed the ocean. I was the only person to cross the ocean of all the children that had been born into that cult to get to the home of the guru, the cult leader. I was presented like Simba and the Lion King to the cult and to the god that I was named after, the African spirit guide that was the medium's name. So here it is. I crossed the ocean, Neptune, to go to the cult Lilith, or Black Moon Lilith. So right after the ascendant that begins the imbalance, that is your chart ruler according to Hidden Truths College, even if it starts at the second, the third, or the fourth, and that's where it starts. What this does in the psyche is, if you think of the process of conception, pregnancy, and birth, birth is where you push through, right? You push through the moon, the womb. You leave the matrix of the moon, and I talk more about each moon sign in your moon lectures and in my book, Shadow Side of the Mother's Love, and you begin your birth, your prophecy, your new story, your new trajectory, your odyssey back home to self. And that is here. So when you're in those states, perhaps of depression, or you're having those womb-like, trying to get others to meet your need, perhaps a breakup, whatever represents you kind of coming back to the world to start new, that's why what's right off of the ascendant, again, even if it's in the third or fourth house, it doesn't matter how far off the ascendant, that first planet is indeed your chart ruler. In my case, because there's a conjunct, there's going to be both, but really the chart ruler is Neptune. And because I'm a Pisces and I have a stellium in Pisces, and you're going to see in a moment how to calculate that chart signature, which in my case is Pisces, there's just a lot of Piscean in terms of my nature. So these are going to be the experiences that I bring in to experience life through that lens. So that is the reason why we use the chart ruler at Hidden Truths College, the planet right off of the ascendant. So let me share the little cheat sheet that I will send with the recording. So it's the first planet off the ascendant. It does not matter whatever house it's in. It's linked to your birth story. I ask clients, do they know about their birth story? So yesterday I was with a friend and I asked her, and she said that there was no problem. The birth story was that everything was perfect. Yet her chart ruler was Pluto, and that would not correlate. So as you start to talk to the person, you can start to see how imbalances occur. And then that Pluto lens could perhaps be viewed incorrectly or damaging or in a self-destructive way because the story doesn't fit. And so the beauty of the chart, whether or not we know the story doesn't matter, is that planet tells us about how we start cycles. So normally if I saw someone with a Pluto right off the ascendant, I would say, okay, umbilical cord wrapped around, there was a death or a crisis happening during the labor or right immediately off the labor. This isn't always the case, but let me give you an example. Here, this is a very interesting case, and I have a story. Usually if there's a space, you saw that mine was like touching the ascendant, it's going to be right off. This person, perhaps it's shortly after, there's a gap between the birth and maybe the drive home, or it maybe wasn't happening in the hospital room, but on the transition to home, or the early days, and we'll get deeper into that by decanat and degrees. But this particular person, I said, you know, you have a strong storyline here that life and death, life equals death, a birth equals death. And not only is her sun in the 8th, where you see life, the sun in the death house, you have here the life giver of the moon, of the mother, next to the black moon. And it turns out that during her pregnancy, her mother lost her mother and her aunt. So we see the life and death sort of mythos lived out there, and she shared with me. So oftentimes when there's a gap, or even if someone's chart ruler is in the 3rd or the 4th, it may be a period of time before they have that initial imbalance or first transition. But I want you to get to thinking that the chart ruler is how the person leads their transitions. Why is this important? Especially when you start doing transits. When you start doing transits and that planet is activated with, in that person's case, a Pluto transit, in my case, a Neptune transit like I have right now, these are going to be very important. Here's a Neptune transit that I have over Mercury and over my sun. I had it recently over my Venus. Those are going to be very marked because they're indicating to my psyche that the chart ruler is Neptune, and therefore anytime there's a Neptune transit. Now, Pluto is a planet that doesn't often have transits in someone's chart, and they're activated. So they might be not as many transitions in life, but when they do have transitions, they're massive transitions. So depending on the chart ruler and how quickly in your speed of the planet sheet they have something can tell you. But it's whatever's right off of the ascendant, because that's going to dictate the birth story and how they start cycles. So somebody might have a Pluto and then conjunct to Jupiter, where it's first crisis, there's first a death of some sort, there's a unclosed cycle or no closure, but then it goes into Jupiter, where that from that death they grow in abundance. So you're going to start to ask them how they've lived out this myth of those planets and how they come off of the ascendant. As I said, in other schools, books, things you'll find online, you're going to find the ascendant. In my case, it's Sagittarius, Jupiter is the planet, and then the 2nd house. Now, this does not mean that this is not true. I absolutely have that happen in my life. I absolutely have Jupiter's sort of growth cycles when I'm in transition, when I start new cycles. So it's not that old or more common way isn't accurate. I'm just giving you an added layer if you want to put them together. In my particular case, Jupiter and Neptune in the old system, and now in the new system, rule Pisces. So it teaches the same sort of message, and I'm a Pisces Sag, so I've got that theme over and over. So you might find a thematic between the Hidden Truths way and the other way and see a theme as well. But it's not that there isn't credence. I just don't like to give only value to the ascendant when all of the cusps have a similar storyline. And dependent on our 12 paths of Hercules, when we start with Aries, for instance, there's no less importance to the Aries cusp that takes me to Mars. In my case, it happens to lead to the second house both times. And so that's why I don't want to give all that energy to that ruler as the ascendant ruler, but rather the planet right off of the ascendant. So the next thing that I want to talk to you about is what is called the chart signature. So a couple of weeks ago, we talked about modality and sign, the crosses and the elements. And it's super important that for specifically level 2, you learn the 3 crosses in and out, all the signs. And what we're going to do is a chart signature so that you can see, that's another way so that you can understand your own lens and how you see the world and how others see the world, even when there is no planet. So what you're going to do is you're going to take all of the 10, and remember, we only use 10. In other schools, in other books, in other programs, in other websites, you're going to find that the ascendant is considered to figure out the signature, and the personality. We only use the 10, not even Chiron and Black Moon for this particular piece of learning. So what I did was I just went down my chart, and this is the way I recommended just for ease. I start here at Neptune. I went to Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, Sun. I skipped Chiron, Saturn, Moon, Pluto, Uranus. So that's the way you're going to see it listed in your cheat sheet. And what I did was Neptune is in Pisces, which is mutable. This should be water, sorry. Which is mutable water. And mine is mutable water is the answer at the end. That's why I have those highlighted. My Mars is in the cardinal Earth. You should know if you hear cardinal Earth, Capricorn. My Jupiter is in fixed air. You should know if you hear fixed air, it's Aquarius. Venus is in mutable water. Mercury and Sun, all mutable water, are Pisces. Actually, I changed this. Why I did that, that's so messed up. It's Sagittarius. I don't know where my head was. I'm sorry about that. My Saturn is in mutable air. You should know mutable air is Gemini. My moon is in cardinal water. You should know that that's Cancer. Pluto, cardinal air, and Uranus, cardinal air, is Libra. Totaling the water that I have and the mutable as the main one. I have 5 mutable and water. So it's now the grouping of how many in the mutable is number 1, mine is 5, and how many water. So I've highlighted here. I've got 1 mutable, 2 mutable, 3 mutable, 4 mutable, 5 mutable cross. Okay. So I guess what threw me off here was I had fire because it's Sagittarius, but I was thinking of mutable water. So my Neptune is in Sagittarius. Now I count up just the elements, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 in water. So I've got 5 mutable cross, 4 mutable water. That's my plus combination, my largest combination. These 2 tell me what my chart signature is, and it's Pisces. Now, in my case, I happen to have a stellium in Pisces. This is going to be the crux of where I view the world as it is. I am an extreme homebody. I teach from home. I work from home. My home life is primary to my existence, and I'm a teacher of spiritual teachings, the 3rd and the 4th. And how have I lived this? I went to Catholic school, Christian school, Baptist school. I've studied all of these things since childhood. I had a very spiritual home life because of the cult and our spiritual activities at home. I've always had a spiritual home. So that's the cluster in which I view the lens. Now, two things. Not everybody is going to have a stellium. Not everybody is even going to have a planet. So again, to the cusp and why the cusp is important. If I didn't have any of these three planets, obviously my signature would be differently, but if I didn't have that cluster there, I would still have a cusp in Pisces that would tell me where the focal point of my life would be. So it's again another lens in which to view the world. I just happen to have three major planets there, and that's the way that I view the world. So when you're doing your chart signature, don't worry if there isn't a specific planet in that sign. What you're doing is you're simply adding up the maximum. So what I did here for you was I put the sign, and then if it was cardinal, fixed, or mutable, fire, air, earth, or water. And you're just going to go down your chart, start at the ascendant, go all the way around, eliminate the black moon, Chiron, the nodes, the earth, the ascendant, all of that, just do the 10, go in order, and then next to it, identify. My Neptune is in Sagittarius, that's the mutable fire. My Mars is in Capricorn, cardinal earth. So go in that order. Now add up how many are the maximum of the cross, and add up how much is the main abundant of the element. That combination, go find it on your chart. That will be your signature. So I mentioned you may have a chart signature with no planets in that sign. That's absolutely okay. So I was talking to a client the other day who had a lot of planets on her fixed cross. And she herself is a Leo, Aquarius moon. So there, right there, two fixed, and a Sagittarius ascendant, which is mutable. But when we added up her polarity, there was about 80% that was fixed. So a friend of hers said to her, that's a lot of fixed. That's the hoarding cross, right? That's the energy that takes. And what we don't want to do, and I'm all about the shadow and I'm all about focusing on low level consciousness. Obviously, we're here to grow and transcend. But what I don't want someone to do is think that what their chart indicates is wrong, because it's exactly about acceptance and understanding that we are exactly who we are supposed to be. So my question to her was, why would you create a chart that needed to be so fixed in nature that it needs to take something for herself and hold on to this energy? And her response was, nothing was mine. I had nothing of my own. She had to fight with older brothers and sisters and even her own parents that were somewhat greedy in their nature. So it's kind of like the dogs that are born and they're fighting for the teat. The person's psychology says, in order for me to get fed, in order for me to have something of my own, I better take it. It's not going to be handed to me and given. So in my case, I have excess mutable. Why would I need to give and give and give and release and release and release? I lived in such a suffocation in a cult environment. Everything is about on top of you and everyone knows your thoughts and there's no privacy. So sort of pushing away or giving away some of the energy disperses it off of the concentration of where I live, came from. So we're here to identify low-level consciousness. We're here to identify incongruencies. We're definitely here to identify areas for potential growth and integration, but we're also here to accept that unchangeable nature. And our chart is unchangeable. It is us on a piece of paper. What we can do is transmute and first accept and work through those incongruencies and low-level consciousness so that we can raise consciousness around what we are here and what is on that diagram. So I just wanted to bring that up today. I thought it was important. So let's look at a couple. So here's somebody who's ruling, their ascendant is Scorpio. So you would go to Pluto, and this person would obviously have a relationship between their ascendant and their 10th house, which is Pluto. In this particular case, they actually, in the 10th house is the mother, also the vocation, and also their public image. This person was a very, very successful trial attorney and very much lived in a Scorpio light at work in their profession. So you see that relationship. However, the chart ruler at Hidden Truths would be Saturn. And so here it is in the second house. Saturn, those Saturn cycles of every 7 years, what I call the skinny cows, are going to be what most mold or begins the client's, in her psyche, begins the client's new birth or new storyline, if you will. As cycles happen, as transits occur, she'll start subconsciously and psychologically with a Saturn, perhaps cutting ties, a detachment, a death, a depression, something related to. And also because it's in the second house, not only of the values and identifying the values that are going to dictate that cycle, but perhaps loss of finances, some financial loss of sorts, almost as an offering to begin the new cycle, something that we give to Saturn, or Saturn in the second could be the idea or the feeling of limitation around finances. So I have to give something away in order to start this new cycle. So there's many ways to look at that. And then this one I already I showed you that this person specifically had 2 deaths during her pregnancy. And another aspect of this person's story is that their father had left their family home shortly after her birth to go marry someone else and have another family. So the family planet is viewed as dangerous, death, put me into exile. They were the abandoned, rejected family. Here's the Cancer sign, rather than the one that father chose. So father himself was put into exile as a result of that. If we're looking at the Cancer ascendant as the ruler, we're looking at the moon, but the moon here is very tied to the black moon. This could be someone who has difficulty having children. This is someone who has difficulty in their home life as a result. And the home life is the 4th, and it's ruled by Virgo. So here you can see perhaps very judgmental, critical, perfectionist home life, maybe in an attempt to not have that similar story happen in her own adult years. That could be a correlation between that. When we look at right off the ascendant, we're looking at the black moon being the ruler of the chart, and that would be not only exile and death, but also a very sacred witch or crone archetype. And this person indeed is a crone currently that has always been quite psychic, and her main gifts are connecting to the dead, identifying if someone's going to die when they're diagnosed with an illness. That's her psychic gift. So it makes sense that she can channel it in a higher vibration, not only death, but of course that supports the sun in the 8th, that the way I shine is through a death lens. And she's a psychic medium, particularly like a death doula, and helping people cross over. So we start to see why we have adopted the lens of the ruling planet in the HTC way, through the way that cycles begin. So let me just check and see if anyone's on. No one's on. Okay. Well, I'm going to send the recording and that document, and we'll post it to the YouTube channel. And if any questions come up when you're calculating your own, please just let me know. Have a great day.